Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jessica Flynn and I'm the owner and maker of Flynn Sisters Boutique. And today we're going to be doing a fun Halloween design with these beautiful vinyls from Banff Custom Creations. We'll also be adding in like a black epoxy drip just for a fun and simple Halloween design. You're going to find all the products that you see in this video listed and linked down below in the description box. That's enough chit chat from me. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, you guys, so today we're working with a black powder coated 20-ounce skinny straight from Craft Haven. I wanted to use this because it'll save me some steps later on. I'm using my lining tool from the Amy's Make Everything to make a straight line down the side of my cup. This will help me line up my vinyl because we are going to be doing a full vinyl wrap today. Once I have my line placed, I'm going to trim up the salvaged edges of my vinyl just so they don't get in my way. I'm also going to trim down the bottom portion that I know I won't need. I've kind of got a rough idea of the length of vinyl already ahead of time because I've like held it up against my cup. And once we've got everything trimmed up and I'm ready to apply it to my cup, I'm just going to peel back about 1 inch of the backing paper of my vinyl, fold it back there, and using that one sticky edge there, we're going to line it up against the line that I drew earlier with my liner tool. And we're going to use that little spot to anchor down while we apply our vinyl with our felt lined vinyl scraper. Notice I have about 1 inch of seam allowance on the top and bottom of my tumbler. This is just going to help me so I'm not so stressed out about everything lining up and maybe coming a little too close or too far from the edge of my cup. So we're just going to go back and forth with the felt side of our vinyl scraper, pushing out all the bubbles and wrinkles, taking our time with this, using the vinyl scraper to push against that paper backing. So we're not moving the paper backing with our hands at all. We're simply pushing it back with the pressure of that vinyl scraper. You guys have seen me do a full vinyl wrap in my videos many times. So I'm not going to go too far into depth with this, but basically just take your time, like I said, moving back and forth with that felt side. Once we reach the end, I'm just going to cut off the large excess of our vinyl with my scissors. Then I will press against the seam where we overlap. And I'm going to place a thin piece of masking tape just to establish about 1/8 of an inch or so overlap to give me an idea of where to trim because it's so hard to see that overlap just with the vinyl. So I use the tape as a guide to show me where to cut. Once we've got that line cut, I will just remove that excess vinyl and we should be left with a nice solid clean seam. Next, to trim the bottom, we'll just pull the excess vinyl as tight as we can around that bottom rim there, and then I will trim off the excess that I can reach with my scissors. Once I've got that trimmed up, I will run it through my edge trimmer just to get a nice clean edge on that vinyl. And then we'll do the same towards the top, only this time instead of running it through my edge trimmer, I'm just going to run my craft knife along the top rim there and get a nice clean trim along the top. Now that we have our vinyl applied, I'm going to grab my ruler and measure some lines down the seam of our vinyl. My cup is about 8 inches tall and I want to place a 3-inch section of vinyl right through the center. So I will just measure my points 2.5 inches from the top and 2.5 inches from the bottom. So I'm easily able to center this 3-inch section of vinyl. I've already cut it from this cute little plaid and I'm just going to line that up against the original seam of our previous vinyl. Do a little run through, make sure the ends will match up here on the other side. And then I'll apply it in the same way that I applied the last vinyl, using the felt side of my scraper in a back and forth motion, using the scraper to push back that paper backing. Once I get to the edge here, I'm just going to trim it really quick with my craft knife. I'm also going to run some thin black vinyl lines along the edges of this plaid vinyl. I've already cut out my vinyl lines. These are 11.5 inches wide by about 0.15 inches tall. Cut it out with my Cricut using the shapes feature. And then once I get to the edge, I'm just going to trim the excess with my craft knife. After we get those vinyl lines applied, I'm going to place this 2 1/4 inch circle at the bottom of my tumbler that I cut out from the same plaid vinyl that we used through the center. Just as an added detail, I am going to be epoxying all of my tumbler today. In my past few tutorials, I have been leaving my bottoms unfinished, but for this design, I feel like it would look best to finish the bottom, especially since this is just a black powder coating, and I feel like it would finish off nicer. If you wanted to leave your bottom open and exposed, you definitely could do that. I'll leave a video down below on how I recommend leaving your bottom unfinished. I've got about 30 milliliters of epoxy here. I didn't use all of it. We want just a thin coat of epoxy before we move on to the next step. I let that coat dry for at least 10 hours before we got started on our power wash bleach spot that I'm going to use to apply my decal. This decal wouldn't look right or stand out against that plaid, so we're just going to paint a little bleach spot with the power wash method. I've got some masking tape here that I'm just ripping the edges for and then taking the sticky off the back of it because I'm going to use this as a guide on where to spray my power wash, because we want to spray our spray paint inside and use the power wash as a masking for where we don't want paint, right? I've also taped off almost half of this tumbler here and most of the bottom because I really only want to get paint on the where you currently see the blue tape. You're going to see what I mean here in just a second. So I'm going to spray a frame around that blue painter's tape with my power wash. Then I'm going to very quickly remove that masking tape. That's why we took the sticky off, so it would be easy to remove quickly. And I'm going to quickly spray some black spray paint. And then I'm going to dip it into my bucket of room temp water here and let this dry for a little bit. It dried really quick. After that, I removed all the excess water, and we're going to repeat that process, only this time we're going to layer white spray paint over the black. I know some of you are thinking, why didn't you just do the white? Well, it's because I kind of wanted to get some depth from the black underneath the white and do some distressing. Didn't come out as pronounced as I wanted it to, but whatever, I still think it looked good. If you wanted to just do white for this step, you definitely could. All right, so after I sprayed that white spray paint, again, directly into my bucket to remove all that excess soap. And then once this is dry, we will pat off all the excess water. And I noticed it wasn't as white as I wanted in that center, so I just sprayed a quick little shot of spray paint, holding it with a paper towel. I didn't even bother masking anything off, just a quick little boop of some paint. We're good to go. All right, let that fully dry for about 20 minutes or so. And now I've got some rubbing alcohol in a paper towel, and I'm just going to clean up the edges of that power wash bleach spot that we just created. I'm also going to remove any excess paint from around my tumbler in places where that paint's not supposed to be. At this time, if you wanted to use some of that rubbing alcohol in the paper towel to expose some more of the black paint underneath in more of a distressing type technique, you could do that as well. It just wasn't working out well for me like I thought it would, but whatever. I also, once I got done with that, spray painted some clear gloss spray paint over that because the paint I was working with was matte, and I'm going to be placing a glossy finish decal right over the top of that. I didn't want it to look weird. Sometimes with these clear decals, if they're glossy, it'll look weird if you mount it against a matte surface, so that's why I did that. To apply this decal, I've folded back about half of the paper backing here and then pressed down that one side after I measured to make sure it's straight. I actually ended up applying this crooked, even though I measured to make sure it was straight, but whatever. After you measure, go ahead and anchor down that first side, making sure you push out any bubbles and wrinkles, and then peel back the remainder of our backing paper and push down the opposite side. This is what's called the hinge method. That's why I think it's easiest for me to apply these types of decals. Once I got done with that, we were ready to move on to our epoxy drips. If you are unsure about your epoxy drips right up against that decal, go ahead and put a coat of epoxy on before you move on to this step. I was just confident and wanted to save myself some time, so I'm not really worried about it. I've already mixed about 20 milliliters of epoxy here. I'm just using regular epoxy. I don't like using fast set for this. It cures way too fast and goes from like 0 to 100 too quickly for me. I've added a few drops of Alumilite's black epoxy dye, and we just want to make sure that that's fully mixed. And then what I like to do is I'll set a timer on my phone for 10 minutes at a time until this gets about the thickness of just under peanut butter. If you want to do a test run against like a plastic Solo cup or something to see how it drips, you could do that too. Just remember, the thinner it is, the more it's going to drip down. The thicker it is, the less it's going to drip down. It took about 45 minutes for my epoxy to get to this point. Just remember to keep setting that timer on your phone to check every 10 minutes. I filmed 3 TikToks while I was waiting for mine to harden up, so it's really not that bad. In my opinion, I don't like using epoxy thickeners and I don't like using puff paint. But by all means, do your drips however you like to do them. This is just how I prefer to do mine. I'm running like a bead of this epoxy around the top rim of my cup, about a 1/2 inch thick from the top rim. If you end up getting some of those strings from the epoxy into like your decal or something, no big deal. You can just easily wipe that up with some rubbing alcohol and a paper towel. It comes right off, no big deal. And of course, anywhere you make it thicker in places, it's going to drip down further than the parts that have less than. And then once I get this all applied, I just kind of babysit it a little bit. And if it starts to drip down too far, I'll hold it upside down in one of my cup arm holders. So I kind of just carry it around the house with me for about an hour. It shouldn't move too much though. I ended up holding it upside down for about 20 minutes or so within that hour. And then by the time I had placed it right side up, it had stopped moving. I let it dry overnight before moving on to the next step. Here's what it should look like so far. This has been drying overnight. I'm using my craft knife to clean up any excess from the top rim here. I'm also going to angle my knife enough to where I expose like a little bit of that stainless steel from the trim. You want to make sure you're doing this with a really sharp knife. If you get any epoxy drip down on the inside, it'll just pop right off with the tip of your craft knife. Just make sure you don't scratch the inside of your stainless steel there. Here you can see how I've got that blade angled to remove just enough from that top rim. I want to take off, a pretty good amount. You could still see that I have that nice fine line of stainless steel. After I've trimmed off all the excess, I'm going to take a 220 grit sanding block. I want to use a finer grit sanding block than what I would normally use because I don't want to scratch up this drip too much. I also don't want to sand down too far. I really just want to clean up this rim here so that my final coats have a nice, happy place to adhere to create the final seal for my tumbler. After I get my sanding around the rim done, I'm just going to get a rubbing alcohol and paper towel to clean up any of that dust, being careful not to disturb my decal and spray paint and stuff on the rest of my cup. I used a tack cloth to remove any excess debris, and now we're ready to move on to our final coats of epoxy. I've got 30 milliliters of epoxy already mixed here, and I'm going to apply it like I normally would. We want to make sure that we seal in those drips completely. Anytime we add colorant to our epoxy, it's always a good idea to seal that in with a clear final coat. Here's another example of a similar design that I did with like a candy and sweets type vibe. Absolutely love it. I just love how this turned out. I love the simplicity. I love these colors for Halloween. Let me know what you guys thought about this in the comment section. And if you liked my video, please be sure to give us a big thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. I upload new videos every Wednesday and Saturday. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon. And a big thank you to all of our Flynn Sisters exclusive members. Thank you for your pledge. Your support means the world to our channel. If you love this video, you could check out our last video here. Also be sure to find us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and of course subscribe for all our new videos that come out every Wednesday and Saturday. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.